I think I've found the most underused aspect of FM that actually has a pretty big weighting in determining whether or not you win or lose a game. Now, I'm going to guide you through it all today, give you all the tips, all the tweaks that you can do to get the best results for your side and give yourself the best chance of getting 3 points. And for our example save today, we're going to be jumping into this Manchester United save where we've got a big game against Arsenal, and I'm going to show you exactly how this tip can really just boost our chances of winning massively. But before we get into that, if you do go on to enjoy this video, make sure you smash the like button for us, or if you find it useful, all of that support is massively appreciated. Comment down below if you've been using this, and subscribe to the channel as well if you haven't already. And last thing, if you want to see this Manchester United rebuild or any of the others that I've done on my channel, you can find them, guess where, on my channel, linked in the description down below. If you want to come and check that out, I'd really appreciate any support on the road to 50k subs. But let's get right into today's tutorial. So, as you can see, it's the 1st of January 2025, and on this day we're about to be playing Arsenal, sitting in 10th place, not doing amazing, but of course it is still Arsenal Football Club, and we want to maximise our chances of getting a win in this game. So what am I talking about in today's tutorial that I think is underused and can help you win matches? Well, it's in the tactics section, and it is opposition instructions. Now, some of you might go, what is that? Some of you might roll your eyes and say, I know what opposition instructions are, I always ask my assistant to do it, they sort it for me. Well, as good as that might be to do, trust me, it is not the best way, and I'm going to show you not only how to understand everything you're seeing here very easily, but also how to implement it and give yourself the best chance of winning the match. But let's start with the basics. What are we seeing on this screen? Well, we are seeing Arsenal's side that we're facing up against and the formation that they like to use. We've also got information about the best goal scorer in the team, the guys creating all of the goals, and the people that make the most dribbles, and we've got an idea of who's in good form, whose morale is bad, whose morale is good, and then a bunch of options, as you can see here, where we can influence the instructions that we're going to have against the opposition. We've got show onto foot. This is an instruction that we can give to our players to advise them to show a certain player onto their left, right, or weak foot. We've also got tackling, which allows us to choose whether we go in easy on the tackles on a certain player, whether we go in normally, or we go in hard. We've got the trigger press option, which determines whether we are going to trigger a press when a certain player has the ball. Don't worry about anything just yet, we'll break it all down later. And then there's tight marking as well, which determines if we want to always mark a player or not mark him tightly and leave him some space. On top of that, we have also got this section here that says players and positions. What this allows us to do if we want to is set opposition instructions for every single position on the pitch, but I think that's a little bit overboard, even though some of you probably think this itself is overboard, but I'll show you in a minute why I think it's not. And the final thing I want to point out is that you can also set opposition instructions for a position on the pitch as opposed to a player. For example, Trossard is playing left mid, and if we click this button here, any instruction that we put on Trossard will only take place when Trossard's on the pitch, but if, say, Martinelli comes on at left mid, it won't take place. Whereas if we click this button on the left, whatever instruction we put on Trossard will apply to everybody. So hopefully that gives you a rough idea of what we're looking at here on a very surface level, but now we're going to break down how we can use this. Now, the whole idea of these opposition instructions is that we're trying to nullify the threat that the opposition pose to us. It's done by looking at a player's attributes and their profile to see things such as where they're weak at, whether they've got a poor foot, maybe they're only left-footed and can't really use their right foot, or maybe they're not very composed and that means we can press them. What we're basically doing is analysing the player and seeing if there's any weaknesses in their game that we can exploit to our advantage. And that might sound complicated, like you need to look in the data hub at a million different reports to get an idea of what we can do to try and give us that extra edge over Arsenal, but trust me, once you understand it, it really isn't. But I imagine the first thing many of you are asking is why not just ask your assistant? I know I've done that in the past, I know a lot of people do it, where they just say, the assistant, you choose the opposition instructions for the game, and if you click this, obviously the assistant then puts on his instructions. So he wants us to tackle hard on Martin Odegaard and then show Fabio Vieira onto his weak foot. Now, our assistant, Ruud van Nistelrooy, will have his reasons for this, and whilst this might help you, it also could potentially hinder you and maybe go against what your team's tactical principles are, and it could actually have the adverse effect. So instead of giving you an advantage, it might give you a disadvantage. And whilst that can also be the same for the opposition instructions that you apply yourself, at least then you're in control, as opposed to Ruud van Nistelrooy telling us to tackle Martin Odegaard harder, somehow that backfires on us, and then suddenly we get the sack sack, even though it's Van Nistelrooy's fault. Maybe he's after that managerial job after all, but yes, that's the reason why I don't think you should fully trust your assistant, although what you can do if you click the clear button here and we go back to basics is without taking their instruction outright by clicking that button, instead you can hover over these speech bubbles where they'll give you an idea and some advice on what they think you should do, and then I actually suggest you then look at that and see if it's worth implementing. And that moves us on to the next part where I'm sure you're asking, Jake, how do I know if I should implement tight marking, trigger press, tackling, or show onto weaker foot for a certain player? Well, don't fear, we're going to break that down now, but before we do, the first thing we really need to know is the tactical principles of our team. Now, I've read plenty of articles about opposition instructions online, combined all of the information together, and one thing that I thought was crucial to mention that I spotted in one article is knowing whether your team is tactically a pressing team or a team that holds their shape. So most people, if you go to your tactics section and to overview, if out of possession you are counter pressing, countering as soon as you win the ball, high pressing line, you are a pressing team. But the alternative to this is a shape team. Now that is a team that instead of pushing onto the opposition when they lose the ball straight away and chasing every single ball down Jurgen Klopp Liverpool style, instead a shape team is one that when they lose a ball, they revert back to their shape. In this case, when possession is lost, if you've got regroup set and then hold shape when possession has been won, you are more likely a shape team, and that is something that we're going to need to know before we go ahead and implement our opposition instructions. The reason being, every single opposition instruction will have a counter effect in some way. For example, let's look at Bukayo Saka, and again, don't worry, I'll break down how you can work this out later, but let's say we really wanted to force Bukayo Saka onto his right foot. What this will do is more often we'll try and force Saka onto this right hand channel on his right foot as opposed to letting him cut in on his stronger left, but that will have an adverse effect too. So yes, maybe we are stopping Saka from getting those shots off on his left foot, but it means more likely he's going to be playing crosses in from the byline, and if we're a team that can't deal with crosses, we've got to deal with that negative effect. So everything we do with these opposition instructions will have an effect but also a counter effect. So we need to bear that in mind, and that's why I spoke about the shape of your team earlier. Because if you're a shape team and you're telling your side that every time you lose the ball, you want them to regroup into their nice 5-back formation, tiki-taka football, whatever it might be, but then at the same time you're asking them to trigger press on a bunch of different players, that then goes against what they're trying to do tactically, and that therefore will have negative effects on your side. So we need to be aware of the kind of team that you are before we get into the actual instructions that we're going to put on players. So now we understand what opposition instructions are, and we also understand our team, it's time to try and start to implement some of these opposition instructions and learning when and where to use them. Now there's two ways really that you can do opposition instructions. The first one is to try and counteract your opposition weaknesses, and the second way to do it is to try and play to your team's strength. So let's talk about that second one, because that one's going to be less individualized. What that will be is that you will have the same opposition instructions every single time pretty much to try and play to your team's strength. For example, here at Manchester United, if we have a look at our squad and our centre backs, you will see my main options at the back right now in this save, or at least they were, this is a rebuild from a long time ago, is Matthias de Ligt. Now he's a very strong lad, he's also very good in the air and good at heading the ball and a good marker too, so we're aware of that, and alongside him is Schlotterbeck, also a big centre back with great strength, heading ability, so we know that we've got two centre backs that are very good aerially as an example. So what that might mean in our opposition instructions is that every single time, no matter who we're facing off against, we always implement the same thing of trying to force teams to go out wide and play crosses instead of getting in the middle. So whether it's Saka and Trossard or Sancho and Pedro Neto, whoever we're up against, we'll be trying to always force them out wide into a cross instead of letting them get into the middle to take a shot. So if you were doing your instructions based on your team's strength, you might always go ahead and show whatever player on the right hand side onto his right foot, whatever player's on the left onto his left, and you get the idea. Alternatively, if you have two centre backs that are pretty weak in the air, maybe you'll try and not invite the crosses and instead you'll force them onto the foot that makes them go inside. So Trossard on the left, we might force him onto his right foot. Now the benefits of this is, one, it will save you time because you won't have to go in and really analyse every single player you're up against, you'll always do the same thing, and the other one is that you'll know your team inside out, you'll know that okay, we're always going to try and force players onto the wings, and therefore you'll know how to react to these situations. But the drawbacks, of course, are that depending on the team you're facing, you might actually be asking for trouble. When it comes to Bukayo Saka and we say, yeah, we always force players out wide for the cross, but Saka's got 16 crossing and he's good on his right foot, so you might actually be inviting yourself into trouble, and that's the reason that I don't suggest you do the same thing every single time. There's also the potential, of course, that we have a player not as good as Schlotterbeck or De Ligt playing. Imagine Lisandro Martinez comes into our team and we still invite crosses. He's only got 12 jumping reach. We come up against someone that's decent in the air and they're going to be scoring loads of goals against him, dunking on him. So for that reason, I think you're better off doing it on an individual basis. Yes, it might be more time consuming, but I think this is going to have the biggest benefits. But now for the fun part, the individual instructions. I'm going to guide you through, as an example, what I might look to do here against Arsenal, and then we'll use another game as an example as well, just to give you a rough idea of how this all works. And we're going to go section by section. Now, the first thing is showing a player onto a certain foot, when to do it, when not to. Well, one big example, like I mentioned with Anthony, if I go and show him, he's a player that has a good left foot but a weak right foot. Now on the skin I'm using, it actually tells me both their left and right foot, but on a normal FM skin, Anthony, it will say left only. And if you ever see a player's footedness like this, where he's really good on one foot but can't really use the other, if you force him onto that weak foot on a regular occasion, so if we were coming up against Anthony, if we weren't Man U, and we forced him onto his right foot, that's really going to limit the ability that he has as a player. Using another Manchester United player as an example, if you came up against Marcus Edwards, he's someone that you probably want to put onto his right foot because he's great with his left, but as you can see, he avoids using his weaker foot. He doesn't want to do it because his weak foot is weak. So if you can force him onto that side, you are going to limit his game massively. Now, naturally, the higher the level you're playing at, the less likely you're going to come across a one-footed player. There might be a lot of them in League 2 and League 1, but in the Premier League, especially at a team like Arsenal, most of these guys are at the top of their game with great attributes and good with both feet. So you might look through and find that there's plenty of players that you can force onto their weak foot, but remember, everything has an adverse effect. So if you always force Saka onto the inside, and maybe you've got a team that has a lot of wide play but not much in the centre, he's going to have a lot of space there. So bear that in mind. So you want to make sure you're thinking about that. If you force Ben White onto his weak foot, for example, and made him play on his left, he might not go down the line, but he'll play into the middle or to the side, and if you haven't got as much cover on those areas as you do out wide, it might have an adverse effect. But this is where knowledge of our team can come in handy, because you remember earlier I realised we actually have some pretty good players in the air in our centre-back positions, and we right now are coming up against Gabriel Jesus, who only has 10 jumping reach. He's not really going to be winning many headers against our big boys, nor is Ethan Nwaneri. He's not really going to be winning many balls in the air. So if we can force crosses in this individual game, and we know about our team being pretty good in the air, it could be a good idea. Now, Saka is someone that I probably don't want to force onto either kind of foot because he's going to be dangerous either way. But if we do look at Leandro Trossard, he's stronger on his right foot and he's a better finisher than he is crosser. So instead of guiding him into this inside channel, I'm actually going to force him out wide for the cross and make him play in the air to Nwaneri and Jesus. Now, does this mean it will work every time? Does it mean it will work perfectly? No. But like everything as a football manager, you're trying to give yourself that little edge that gives you the best chance of winning a game. And outside of that, I didn't really notice anything personally that I felt we could do in terms of showing a player onto a weak foot that I thought would be beneficial enough to force into our team's tactics. However, you can see from this speech bubble that Ruud van Nistelrooy thinks we should put Fabio Vieira onto his weak foot. Now, at a first glance, I thought, why would you want that? Because he's actually pretty decent on his right foot. He can use it. But if we have a look, he avoids using his weaker foot, and when he does get the ball, he tries to move it onto his left foot before he dribbles. So if we can force him onto his right foot, we're going to limit his dribbling ability, limit his ability to get through the centre of the pitch. So actually, I'm going to say, let's do that. Let's force him onto his weaker foot. That's going to force him onto his right, and I think that's going to hurt Fabio Vieira's game more than it will actually affect us in a negative way. So I'm going to put that on too. So when it comes to showing a player onto a certain foot, they're the things that you want to consider. But tackling is a little bit different, because with tackling, if we're going to say we're going in hard on someone, you want to do this on a player that has low bravery and low aggression. So if we take a look at Trossard, for example, he's not got a terrible amount for aggression or bravery. So if we go in hard on him, there's a good chance that he'll still come out with the ball. But if you find a player that's not brave, that might shirk out of a challenge, after having a look, here's Odegaard, who's got low bravery and low aggression. I'm going to say, you know what? Let's go in hard on Martin Odegaard. Let's tackle him. And as you can see, that is something that Ruud van Nistelrooy was suggesting. Because Odegaard isn't the best when it comes to a challenge like that, we're going to go in hard on him. Now, again, the negative effect of that is tackling harder, tackling on a more regular basis increases a chance of getting a card, and Odegaard Odegaard being a smart player, with his anticipation and his composure, maybe he'll get out of the way of that, but I'm going to take my chances because he's not brave and because he's not very aggressive. If we come in and have, Casemiro smashing into him, that's going to affect his game by the looks of it here in FM. Then there's the trigger press option. Now this, as you can imagine, as you've seen in many real life football games, I'm sure, is when there's a certain player on your team or a team that you watch where you go, actually, he's pretty weak on the ball, he's not as good as everyone else, and what you'll see the opposition do is they'll wait to press, and as soon as the ball goes to them, they'll charge in on them. I'm trying to think of one specific example, but imagine if I was playing in this Arsenal team, I'd be nowhere near as good as everyone else, and when I get the ball, I'll have a better chance of losing it if someone pressed me, so therefore, that is when you trigger the press. You'll be looking at attributes such as anticipation and composure, as well as first touch to determine if something is worth pressing straight away. Ben White, for an example, has great first touch, he's really composed, and if you went in and pressed Ben White heavily, he'll probably just go round you. But in the second game example that I'm going to show you, I'll show you someone that is worth triggering a press on, but that is how trigger press works, and they're the attributes that you're looking for in a player to trigger the press on. And then there's tight marking. This is great for players that maybe aren't the quickest or not the greatest in terms of their movement, or maybe not very strong. So Ethan Nwaneri is probably the weakest link in this Arsenal team right now at his age, because he isn't very strong, as you can see. He's also not got the best decision making, and his off the ball movement isn't fantastic. So if we asked a really smart defensive midfielder or a really smart centre back to man mark Ethan Nwaneri, get close to him, outmuscle him every time, that could have a benefit to us. But what you want to be careful is that you don't have a player like Gabriel Jesus. You might look at him and think, yeah, we can really get up in Jesus's face, but he's got 16 off the ball movement, he is quick, he's agile, he's going to be darting away from that tight mark, and sometimes it's probably the one that I'd say out of all of these that can have the biggest adverse effect if you get it wrong. If you ask to mark really tightly, let's say we did on Jesus, thinking that we'll outmuscle him, and then suddenly he just slips away from our defender, gets in behind the line, and has an easy chance to score. Tight marking is going to put your defensive player right up against him, and sometimes that can be positive but also negative, so bear that in mind. In this case, I don't think there's anyone that I want to have tight marking on, but just by doing this, you will see that we've had a little effect on our team. Obviously, once you get the hang of it, it takes nowhere near as long as I'm describing. You'll do this in a few simple clicks, but we're now going to try and limit what Martin Odegaard does for Arsenal by tackling him harder. He is one of their best creators, so forcing him that way is going to be beneficial to us. In a second, I'm going to show you a game where we can do some completely different instructions to try and counteract someone, but I do just want to point out one more thing on tight marking, and that is that I really don't suggest it against wide players. Wingers tend to be the fastest, the trickiest players on a team, so if you put up your right back right next to, say, Martinelli, all Martinelli has to do is use his dribbling ability to spin round him, and suddenly he's gone. So be really careful with tight marking. I found it can have some positive effects, but also has the biggest risk of not working. But let's switch to a different game now. Here we go. We're coming up against a West Ham side. A bit of a different challenge to an Arsenal team. They're playing a different shape as well. A 4-2-3-1 system with some good players in many areas, but also not in the best of form and not technically as good as the Arsenal players would have been. So there might be more chances here now for us to try and exploit the weaknesses in this West Ham team to give us the best chance of winning this match. Now, I think you should do this for every game, but I understand if you don't want to, so maybe you can save doing this special instructions for the big matches. But even if it just gives you that extra 5-10% chance of winning, that would be massive across the course of your season. So let's break down what I would do here against West Ham. Now, if we go firstly through Van Nistelrooy's suggestions and take a look at them, he's given us two instructions. The first one is showing Nicholas Füllkrug onto his weak foot. Now, if we have a look at Füllkrug, he is someone that has a pretty good left foot, to be honest. I don't really know if I agree with that. Obviously, it will be beneficial in some way to force him onto his left because it's not as good as his right. But is it the one thing that I really would have picked out and be forcing our players to do? I'm not so sure. Remember, you don't really want to overload your players with a million different instructions, so I'm not going to take that one into account just yet. But the other one that he's mentioning is to trigger the press on Kurt Zouma. So if we have a look at Zouma, you will notice straight away he is a player that has 11 passing, not great vision, not much technique. His first touch isn't amazing for a Premier League level, ball, and his composure isn't the best in the world. So they've identified him as a player that when he gets the ball, that's when we press. And because we are a pressing team, remember, if you're not a pressing team, you probably don't want to do this as it will go against your instructions. But in this case, when Zuma gets a ball, we are going to press on him, and that's a great example of when to use the trigger press. But West Ham pose a different threat to what we had with Arsenal, because they've got a big man in the middle in Fulkrug, and if we invite a load of crosses in this sense, he's actually got a pretty good chance of beating De Ligt and Schlotterbeck to the ball in the air. He's a great headerer, he's got good jumping reach and strength, so he might have to play a little bit differently in this game and maybe not invite the crosses so much. Now let's go one by one. I'm going to start with the show onto foot, and I've been through all of the options, and the one that really stuck out to me wasn't Fulkrug that Ruud van Nistelrooy suggested, but instead it was Zuma again, who is really weak on his left foot. He is set as right only in the normal FM skin, and in my skin it shows me that he's weak on his left, he's strong on his right. That's something that we might be able to exploit. And also notice how he gets forward whenever possible. If we trigger the press and capture him as he's running forward, that's going to leave a lot of space, so that's something to bear in mind. But yes, when we come into show onto foot, I might want to force Zuma onto his weak foot, which would be his left. But remember, everything you do has a counter effect, so let's think about it. If we force Zuma onto his left foot, he likely won't play out to Mavropanos, and he probably won't be able to play forward straight away to Ward-Prowse. Instead, he's likely going sideways to Aguerd, or maybe to Guido Rodriguez in this position. Now, is that beneficial to us? Maybe. It forces him away from being able to play out wide, which helps in what we mentioned earlier about probably not wanting West Ham to be playing too many crosses in, but it does also have the potential to get the ball in this middle area where James Ward-Prowse has been so prolific. But realistically, a lot of those Ward-Prowse assists will have came from set pieces. I think I'll be pretty happy to force him onto his weak foot. So after analysing that and actually thinking more than just, oh, he's not good on his left, let's force him onto his left, I'm happy to do so. Then onto the tackling section. Again, you're looking for those players that aren't very brave and aren't very aggressive. Guido Rodriguez is decent in those areas. James Ward-Prowse also pretty aggressive, fairly brave. But if we look at Somerville, even though we haven't got a full report on him, we can see he's not going to be the most brave. He's not very aggressive either. And if we can get in and really just crunch Somerville early, that's going to affect his chances in this game of being an effective presence on that right wing. So he's the one I've identified as being able to put in a hard tackle on. The trigger press, we've already looked at Zuma as the man that we want to trigger presses on when he gets a ball. You could do that on multiple players if you want to, but for me, he's the one when he gets it, that's when we're going to press in. But then the other thing that I've found for this game in particular is tight marking on James Ward-Prowse. Let me give you the reason why I think that's good, because Ward-Prowse as a player is technically very good. He's pretty composed as well on the ball, but he's a pretty weak dribbler, and he is not the quickest by any stretch of the imagination, nor is he super agile or anything like that. So we know there's not much speed about his game, and he's not really going to be able to dribble around the man, but if you leave James Ward-Prowse with the ball, with his passing ability, with his vision, he's going to pick out a pass and really affect us in this match. So if we sit someone on him, we can mark him tightly and we can hopefully limit his ability in this game. Now, does it mean it will work perfectly and nothing will go wrong? No. Does it mean I found everything that might help us in this match? No. Some of these might have a negative effect in the end, but I'm trying to impact my team in the best way by using the information given by Football Manager to give ourselves those slight chances of winning the game. Their tactics could completely nullify what I'm doing, but by looking at what I've seen so far, I'm hoping this can help us. And with that, I'd be pretty happy to go into this game, but I have noticed one more thing in this match that might go slightly against what you thought I might do, and that is Jacob Ramsey. Now, he is on the left wing for Aston Villa in this game, and I mentioned I don't want crosses into Fulkrug, but if we look at Jacob Ramsey, just from this you can see he's good on his right foot, not so good on his left. On top of that, if you actually look at Jacob Ramsey, he is a brilliant finisher. If we guide him on the inside, he's got a great chance of scoring a goal from just outside the box, from getting into the box and shooting, but actually crossing wise, he's not the best crosser in the world. So I actually think, even though Fulkrug is good in the air, on this side of the pitch with Ramsey, I'm going to force him onto that left foot. I want him to play on the left foot, onto his weaker side, have to play across with his left, which is not going to work as often as him cutting in and scoring on his right. Again, does that mean that he won't be able to play a crossing and meet Fulkrug at some point? No, but I think it gives us the best chance of winning this game, taking away some of his strengths, playing into some of ours with our good aerial centre-backs, and giving us a better chance of winning the match. And just to see if those instructions worked. I've played the match against West Ham, we won 3-1. We limited them to pretty much no chances at all. The only goal they scored was an absolute blast of a strike from Fulkrug. The assist went to James Ward-Prowse, which maybe went against what we tried, but it wasn't really the kind of assist you expected. He just laid it off and then Fulkrug laced through it and scored the goal, but we forced them to take Somerville off on a 6.3 rating. Kurt Zuma didn't have a good game. They ended up shifting to a 5 back as well. Somerville got subbed off at half time. Jacob Ramsey didn't end up finishing the game either, neither of them having a great day. And overall, I think the instructions worked. Now, would we have won this game anyway? More than likely, but those instructions certainly helped, and I think it's one of the biggest secrets in FM that not enough people are using. It's a fantastic way to boost your chances by 5-10% of winning a match, and I think you should all be using it in your saves. But there we go. Hopefully you have found this useful. Hopefully you have enjoyed. If you have, smash the like button, and I'll see you next time. Goodbye.